The sun scorched the red sands of the distant planet, turning the desert into a glowing, endless sea of heat. Rocks jutted out like broken teeth, and strange humming plants stretched toward the sky. The air shimmered with waves of heat, making the world seem alive, almost breathing. In the middle of this harsh land, a small human boy stumbled through the sands, his clothes torn and dusty, his shoes worn. He carried a small piece of bread in his hand, a precious remnant from the ship that had crashed days ago. Ethan had never imagined he would end up here. He had been traveling with a cargo ship, delivering goods to distant colonies, when a violent storm of magnetic storms and gravitational surges had tossed the ship into the planet's atmosphere. He remembered the chaos, the alarms, the sound of metal tearing, and then nothing. When he woke, he was alone, the wreckage smoldering in the distance, and the planet stretched before him, barren and strange. He had been surviving carefully, hiding from the alien creatures he had seen from a distance. Some were tall, covered in hard scales, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Others moved silently in the sand, their long limbs creating strange shapes on the ground. He had learned quickly that curiosity could be deadly, but hunger was stronger than fear. The bread was his only comfort, and each bite was savored as though it were gold. As Ethan trudged across the sands, a shadow fell over him. He froze. His heart pounded as he turned his head slowly. Towering above him was a group of aliens, their skin like bronze and gold shimmering in the heat. Their faces were alien, with sharp ridges and piercing eyes. They moved with fluid grace, clearly aware of every movement Ethan made. "Come with us," a deep, commanding voice boomed. Ethan's stomach dropped. There was no choice. He nodded and followed, keeping his hands visible and his bread hidden. The aliens did not speak a language he could understand, but their gestures were clear. They walked swiftly, taking him to a rocky clearing where more aliens were gathered. At the center of the gathering sat a giant, imposing figure on a carved stone throne. His scales were darker than the others, and his eyes seemed to pierce through everything. This was Gorath, the chief of the desert tribe. Stories Ethan had heard from glimpses of the alien life forms told him that Gorath was feared across the desert for his strength, his wisdom, and his unpredictability. Every alien in the clearing stopped and stared at him as he was brought forward. Ethan's knees shook. The boy had faced storms, wrecks, and hunger, but standing before Gorath felt different. It was not just fear, it was the weight of history, the sense that he was standing before someone who could change his life with a single decision. Gorath leaned forward, his head tilting slightly as if studying him like a specimen. The tribe members murmured among themselves, their voices sharp and musical yet tense. They expected Ethan to beg, to plead, or to cower. Humans, they had been told, were fragile, insignificant, and weak. Ethan's mouth was dry, but he took a deep breath. His hand went instinctively to the piece of bread. He did not want to be rude, and somehow, he felt that fear alone could not guide his actions here. He held the bread out carefully, trying to appear calm. "You can have my bread," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. The aliens froze. The murmuring stopped. Every eye turned to him, incredulous. They had never seen a human offer something freely. Their world was harsh, unforgiving. Every bite of food was fought for, every gift earned. Generosity was considered foolishness. And yet this small human boy had offered it without hesitation. Gorath's eyes narrowed as he leaned back slightly, processing what he had just heard. He studied Ethan carefully, his gaze intense as though he could see through the boy's mind. There was a long silence, broken only by the soft hum of the desert plants. The tribe was confused, whispering quietly among themselves. Some looked at Ethan with suspicion, others with amazement. Then, unexpectedly, Gorath rose from his throne. His movements were slow and deliberate. The entire tribe held its breath. Ethan's heart raced. He expected punishment, perhaps anger or even dismissal. But Gorath did something no one anticipated. He gestured to a large container filled with their food, a mixture of nuts, strange fruits, and water-rich plants, and motioned for Ethan to take a seat beside him. The boy blinked, unsure. Are you serious?" he asked. Gorath did not speak in words he could understand. Instead, he offered a small nod and a gesture, indicating that Ethan was welcome. The boy hesitated for only a moment before sitting down on the warm rock, his knees drawn close to his chest. The tribe watched silently, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Ethan took a cautious bite of the alien food, testing the flavors. It was strange yet nourishing. and he realized how hungry he truly was. The act of sharing bread had bridged a gap he never thought possible. "You are different," Goreth said finally, his deep voice translating through his translator device that Ethan had managed to salvage from the wreckage. "Humans, you are small, yet you carry courage in your heart." The boy smiled faintly. "I'm not very brave," he admitted. "I'm just trying to survive." Goreth's eyes softened slightly, a rare expression for the fierce chief. "Survival is courage," he said. "And courage is respect." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in fiery reds and purples, the tribe began to relax. Ethan shared what little he had while the aliens shared theirs. A strange bond was forming, not through force, not through dominance, but through something far older, the simple act of giving. That night, Ethan slept under the alien sky, the cool desert breeze brushing against his face. For the first time since the crash, he felt safe. Goreth stood on the cliff above the village watching the boy sleep, thinking about the small human who had dared to give freely. In a world ruled by power and fear, this act of kindness had shifted something deep within him. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the sound of footsteps. The tribe had gathered in a circle, curious eyes on him. Goreth approached, and this time he held a small, intricately carved token, offering it to the boy. It was a sign of trust, an acknowledgement that Ethan was no longer just a survivor. He was a guest, a member of something greater than himself. But life on this planet was harsh. Food was scarce, storms came without warning, and the desert could turn deadly in an instant. Ethan knew that earning respect was one thing. Surviving the dangers of the planet was another. Still, he felt a strange surge of hope. If a boy could offer bread and touch the heart of an alien chief, then perhaps anything was possible. The day passed with Ethan learning from the tribe. He observed their hunting methods, their careful ways of conserving water, and the delicate balance they maintained with the desert. Despite the alien differences, he noticed something familiar: courage, honor, and a sense of community. The aliens were not just fierce, they were proud, protective, and capable of deep loyalty. By evening, a disturbance arose. Smoke appeared on the horizon, rising in dark columns. The tribe tensed immediately. Goreth's stance changed, alert and commanding. Ethan realized that life here was never peaceful for long. He looked to Goreth, wondering what would happen next. The chief did not panic. Instead, he called the tribe together, issuing orders in a language Ethan could not understand. The boy watched, fascinated, as the aliens moved with precision and unity. And then Goreth's gaze found Ethan's, and the boy felt a surge of confidence. The chief trusted him to observe, to learn, and perhaps to act. Ethan clutched his small piece of bread, no longer just a meal but a symbol of his place here. He realized that courage was not about strength or size, it was about choice. And he had made the right choice. As night fell again over the desert, Ethan felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had survived the first challenge, meeting the alien chief and proving that even a small human could matter. The future was uncertain, full of dangers and surprises, but he was ready. For now he was not alone, and in the vast alien desert that was everything. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the red sands in shades of gold and orange. Ethan woke with the warm breeze brushing his face, the cool night air replaced by the dry heat of day. The village of the alien tribe was alive with movement. The aliens worked quietly, collecting water, preparing food, and maintaining their dwellings made from carved stone and heat-resistant materials. Ethan stretched and rubbed his eyes. He had learned much in the past days, but he knew he was still an outsider. Goreth, the chief, had not only accepted him but also observed him closely. The boy knew the chief expected more than just survival. He expected understanding, courage, and perhaps a spark of creativity. As Ethan walked through the village, he noticed the aliens moving in strange patterns. They were practicing defensive formations, drills he did not yet fully understand. He followed silently, watching how they worked together. Each movement was precise, efficient, and purposeful. There was no wasted motion, no doubt in their coordination. It was then that the horizon darkened unnaturally. A column of dust rose far away, carrying with it a familiar sense of danger. Ethan's stomach tightened. A rival tribe was approaching, known across the desert for their aggression. They sought to take resources by force, and the peaceful desert village would be their target. Goreth sensed the threat immediately. His voice, deep and commanding, rang across the village. The aliens moved like a single organism, preparing for the incoming attackers. Ethan noticed how they positioned themselves, creating barriers, hiding spots, and vantage points. He realized that their training and experience were vast, but there was one thing they had not seen: a human mind unbound by tradition, capable of thinking differently. Ethan stepped forward hesitantly. "I can help," he said. The tribe members turned to look at him, some skeptical, some curious. Gorath's eyes met his, and for a moment the desert seemed to hold its breath. Then the chief nodded subtly, a signal for Ethan to contribute. Ethan ran to a nearby pile of wreckage from his crashed ship. Using pieces of metal, ropes, and parts of the ship's hull, he began creating simple traps and barricades. He worked quickly, improvising with ingenuity. He tied ropes across narrow paths to trip attackers, created decoys using metal scraps, and set up areas that could funnel enemies into safe ambush zones. The aliens watched in awe. They had never seen such clever use of materials in such a short time. Ethan moved with determination, explaining his plan through gestures and simple words. Slowly, the tribe began to understand. They adjusted their formations, integrating the human boy's ideas with their own techniques. As the rival tribe appeared on the horizon, the village was ready. Dust rose around the advancing enemies, their shapes large and imposing. The first wave of attackers charged toward the village, expecting an easy victory. They were met by a combination of alien strength and human strategy. Traps were triggered, decoys confused the attackers, and the aliens struck with precision. Ethan moved alongside them, his heart pounding, his mind calculating each move. He directed the tribe subtly, pointing out weak spots in the enemy's formation. His small size and quick thinking allowed him to move unseen in areas the aliens could not reach. Time and again, his decisions turned the tide of skirmishes. Gorath stood on a high rock watching the battle unfold. His eyes softened as he saw the boy's courage. The human was small, fragile by appearance, yet he acted with confidence and wisdom beyond his years. For a long moment, the chief realized something profound. Humans, despite their size, could inspire change, could teach even the strongest alien warriors new ways to think and fight. Hours passed, and the desert echoed with the sounds of battle, roars, shouts, and the crash of metal against rock. The attackers grew frustrated, unable to break through the combined defenses. Every time they thought they had an advantage, Ethan's clever traps turned their plans upside down. The aliens began to see the human not as a weak creature but as a vital ally. Finally, the rival tribe retreated, their numbers diminished and morale broken. The village stood victorious, though not without effort. The aliens moved carefully among their wounded, tending to each one with precision and care. Ethan, exhausted but exhilarated, took a moment to breathe. He had survived, and more importantly, he had helped the tribe succeed. Gorath approached him slowly, his massive form casting a long shadow. "You have done more than survive," the chief said, his voice deep and steady. "You have led. You have taught us that courage comes in many forms." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Led? I just tried to help." Gorath chuckled softly, a sound that resonated like distant thunder. "That is what a leader does. Courage without action is nothing. You acted. You showed us the value of ingenuity and selflessness." The tribe gathered around, their expressions full of respect. Aliens who had once doubted him now stood with admiration. Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had only given bread when first meeting the chief, yet that small act had begun a journey that led to this moment. The sun began to set again, casting long shadows across the village. Ethan sat beside Gorath on the cliff, watching the desert stretch endlessly before them. The boy realized that he had grown in ways he had never imagined. He had survived storms, hunger, and fear, but he had also learned the power of courage, generosity, and intelligence. Gorath broke the silence. "Humans, you are remarkable. Small yet capable of great influence. You have reminded us that strength is not only in the body but in the mind and heart." Ethan smiled. "I never thought a human could teach aliens anything. I thought I was just lucky to survive." "Luck?" Gorath shook his head slowly. "You call it luck, but it is more than that. You chose to act when fear would have stopped most. You chose generosity when selfishness was the easier path. That is courage. That is wisdom. That is human." The boy felt a swell of pride. He looked back at the village below, at the aliens moving among their homes, rebuilding, tending to each other. They had accepted him, respected him, and even learned from him. And he had learned from them the value of unity, strategy, and honor. Days passed, and the village slowly returned to normal. Ethan continued to learn from the tribe, gaining new skills and understanding the ways of the desert. He helped with hunting, gathering, and teaching small strategies that improved the tribe's efficiency. The aliens now trusted him completely, consulting him on matters big and small. One morning, Gorath summoned him. The chief handed Ethan a small carved emblem, a symbol of the tribe's respect and friendship. "You are one of us now," Gorath said. "Not by blood, but by choice, by action, by courage. You have proven that humans can inspire greatness." Ethan held the emblem carefully, feeling its weight and meaning. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Do not say anything," Gorath replied. "Let your actions continue to speak. That is all that matters." Ethan spent the following weeks exploring further, helping the tribe establish safe zones and improving their defenses. He discovered new plants, navigated hidden canyons, and learned to read the desert storms before they struck. The tribe admired his knowledge, his bravery, and his clever thinking. Children began to follow him, curious about the human who had changed their world with courage and kindness. One evening, while watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ethan reflected on his journey. From a small boy with only a piece of bread, he had become a part of something greater. The aliens had taught him survival, honor, and loyalty. He had taught them that courage could be small but powerful, that intelligence could shift the balance, and that generosity could change hearts. Gorath approached once more, standing beside him as they watched the stars appear one by one. "You have changed us," the chief said quietly. "And I believe you will change more. Humans are rare here, yet the few who act with courage leave a mark that echoes." Ethan nodded. He realized that being human was more than surviving. It was about making choices, standing for what was right, and using every opportunity to inspire others. The desert was harsh, the stars distant, but he no longer felt small. He was a human boy, yes, but one who had proven that even the smallest being could make a difference. And in that moment, under the vast alien sky, Ethan understood something important. Courage, kindness, and intelligence were universal. They transcended species, planets, and worlds. And for the first time, he felt at home, not just in the village, but in the universe itself. The tribe celebrated quietly that night, honoring their victory, their survival, and the small human who had stood with them. Gorath looked at Ethan with respect and pride, knowing that the boy had not only helped them survive a battle, but had reshaped the way they viewed humanity forever. Ethan lay down under the stars, exhausted but happy. He had come to this planet as a survivor, but he would leave, or rather live here, as a hero, a teacher, and a bridge between two very different worlds. And though the desert stretched endlessly, full of unknown dangers, he knew that with courage, wisdom, and a heart willing to act, even the smallest human could face the greatest challenges. The desert wind whispered softly, carrying the sounds of the village below. And for the first time since the crash, Ethan felt truly at peace.